What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 5 of Art of Resilience with my man Joemil Santos. I'll let him explain everything that he does and who he is because I think it's only right for people to do that for themselves. But my name is Hussein Albiati. I'm your host, and I'm extremely excited to have my good friend Joemil come join me today and have this conversation. We're going to talk about life, talk about work, talk about community involvement, engagement, and the importance of putting the why ahead of your how, because that's what our drives are. That's how we connected. So my man Joemil and I met, I would say about 4 years ago now, at a sort of the My People's Market, and we had a conversation over our t-shirt, where our t-shirt just sparked that conversation. And now we have been friends, helping one another through great times and not so great times. I rely on him for advice. I rely on him for encouragement, empowerment, and I can't wait to get into this conversation because you guys are going to hear somebody that really inspires me and helps me put things in perspective in ways that I don't necessarily see. And his wisdom, his kindness, his family orientation is something that I admire, and I am extremely excited to have my man Joemil here. Joemil, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming, my man.
I love you, bro. I love you.
See what I'm saying? I love you too, man, and I'm excited you're here, bro. So, man, first of all, tell us who Joemil is and what he's doing right now, and then we can dive back into some stories, man.
That's a loaded question, right?
Yeah, it is, of course.
Well, by title, I'm a neighborhood outreach coordinator for New Seasons Market.
Yes.
I also serve on the board for Growing Gardens. I serve Village Gardens, another nonprofit organization over here, based in New Columbia.
Okay.
Right. I also serve on our partner fund committee over at New Seasons. Okay. And that's a fund that's really designed to help entrepreneurs of color, women-owned businesses, LGBTQIA businesses, people who've been historically marginalized and haven't had the same access to capital, right?
That's amazing, man. That's amazing. Your hands are, that's the work. But here's the cool part.
Yeah.
You didn't just fall into this work.
Oh, no.
This has been years in the making. So let's take it back. I want to take it back to, basically where things started for you. So you could take it as far back as when you were born.
Sure.
Or you could take it as far back as high school. Whatever you feel is more important, or what's relevant to the stories in which we'll get into to discover who Joemil is. Sure. So what I want to say is, I don't really like to nitpick a specific story, but you tell us, man, tell us where things started for you and how you got to this trajectory.
Well, I think it goes back to family, right? And it goes back to the sacrifices that, my great grandfathers made and my grandmothers. If we fast forward to the sacrifices that my mom and dad made to move here from the Philippines, right? With that same kind of understanding, right, that there was a better life for their family here, right? I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the sacrifices of my family, for the support of my sister. I mean, even before we got started, all this is emotional, right? Yeah. And it starts there for me. It starts with family, right?
That's beautiful, man. When did you come here? What year?
I think my mom came here first in 76. Okay. I was born here in 78, right? Okay. So that's aging me right there. That's just giving me straight. But yeah.
Okay.
A lot of sacrifice, right? Yeah. A lot of courage, right?
100%.
Jump into something that you had no idea, like the systems, everything. My folks didn't know how it all worked, right?
Absolutely. Did you come straight here to Portland, or were you somewhere else first?
I was born and raised in just outside of LA, right? Okay. So in the San Fernando Valley.
Wow.
Right. you know, and they struggled to put my sister and I through private schools, private Catholic schools. Um, you know, literally went bankrupt to do that, right?
Wow.
And just gave us every opportunity um, to discover and be who we needed to be or want to be or whatever the case is, right? It wasn't always easy, right? You know, there was a lot of there was just a lot of struggle in all of it, right? And yet I never bared any of that struggle, right? And I think that's, again, that's for me, that's testimony to my folks, right? I didn't know about any of the financials or anything that
Sure.
growing up. I don't think it's commonplace for families of color to speak about those things, right? But you know, I went to the best schools in the area. If I showed an interest in, let's say, art, my parents found classes for me. If I showed interest in sports, they put me on teams. Same with my sister, you know.
Wow.
And you know, we excelled. You know. So, you know, it's a testimony again to like just working hard and putting it into practice, right? And so,
What did your parents do? Like, what were they working? What kind of jobs were they working to help, support and provide for you?
I mean, that's a great question right there. My mom worked 2 jobs most of my life,
Sure.
right? She worked a graveyard shift and a day job too, you know. And the routine was fairly simple, you know. Pops would take us to the carpool, you know, in the mornings. Moms would pick us up. She'd take us straight to whatever practice we had. You know, we weren't always on just one team, you know, because of how well we did in those things. You know, we always found ourselves on like traveling teams or whatever the case was, right? And so she would take a nap in the car, and Pops would come in from work after that, right?
Wow.
You know, they were always there.
It's amazing, man.
And so, you know, we get home, Pops would cook dinner, Mom would take a little nap, you know. Like, I can't imagine she had more than 3, 4, 5 hours of sleep, right? And then would get up and do that graveyard thing, you know. And this was all just to continue to support my sister and I.
Wow.
And, you know, the beauty of it for me was that they never pushed me in a direction.
So they're not pushing you, but definitely supporting you, supporting your growth, and sort of supplementing, making sure that the nutrients that you needed to grow were there.
Yeah.
But it's hard work. I'm sure we'll talk about this more. Gardening is not easy. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It sounds good, but it's not easy.
No.
It's an extremely difficult and tedious process. And I feel, you know, I'm with you in the sense that, like, you know, as immigrants and refugees, like, we're transplanted plants, right? There was an environment in which we couldn't grow in, and our parents knew that. There's a part of them, whether they were forced or chose to move, right? It's difficult, period. And so, but the idea is, even if they didn't have you yet, they knew they were going to.
Yeah.
Right? And they wanted to make sure that where that seed landed, it was an appropriate environment to get the nutrients, to get the things that they needed for you to grow and have a, you know, that better life, right? And the environment in which America has provided, it's the environment for the immigrant, really, to come and grow and take your chance, take your shot.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like our parents, they didn't necessarily take their shot, right? But they did with us in a way, right? We were the shot,
Yep.
right? And there is a level, for me at least, there's almost a level of guilt, right? Because, and I don't mean that in a negative way, just negative, because guilt is a weird thing. But like, in the sense that, like, though my dad did a lot, he did his thing here, he helped raise, you know, all those beautiful things. I just think about, like, wow, what if my dad came when my age? You know what I mean? Like, what were the things, you know, what would he be doing? But I can't think like that because I came at my age. And now I'm growing up and realizing, like, wow, I have so many opportunities, and this is exactly what he wanted me to see.
Yeah.
But because he couldn't seek it the way I can, language, barriers, racism, all these, things that he had to navigate, and my mom too, of course, like yours did, I'm sure. And then also protect you from that world of, like, it's all good, like having this positive perspective on things, and then kind of, coddling you from the not so negative until you are old enough to realize it. Was that something that happened in your life? And, when I say, like, when your parents, what do they work, that kind of stuff, was there a sense of, like, did you, as growing up, you became a teenager, you're growing up now, was there a sense of a part of you that was like, man, I'm having this opportunity, but they're just working all day?
Absolutely. I think it was never hidden, right? That they gave everything to my sister and I.
Wow.
They gave everything to my sister and me, and it was this guilt that you make mention of, right?
Mm-hmm.
It certainly I certainly carried that with me for a time,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, that I think the beauty of all that is it transforms into gratitude, right?
Wow.
And gratitude for, again, the lineage, right? The great great greats, for mom and dad, for sister, for the aunties and uncles, right? For the communities that that hold you up, like, I think that's part of what saved me going around, right? Is that with all the highs and lows, I don't think I ever touched the ground.
Wow.
Because I was supported by my family or by the community that I was serving, or that the community that took me in at the time, right? Because there was certainly a lot of moments where I would describe myself as lost, right? As wandering, right? And I think maybe wandering is more apropos word,
Let's go there.
Yeah.
Tell me about wandering.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time where, I could be found walking around Central Coast, California, over there in San Luis Obispo, Morro Bay, Los Osos, with a shoulder bag that had a couple books in it, a notebook, a pen, and a whole bunch of folded pieces of paper, right? And I was just hungry for, conversation. I was hungry to learn, right?
Yeah.
I was there for school, right? I went to college at San Luis Obispo. But quickly learned that, that it was the people that had the answers, right? It was the people that held the wisdom. It was the people that, and their experiences, that were going to continue to guide and help me along the way, right?
Wow.
And so, when I was supposed to be in class, I was in conversations at the coffee shop, or at a older friend's house or something, where they were, teaching me chess, or, we're playing dominoes and having these deeper conversations, right? These things that came down to experience again, right? Yeah.
I love that.
Wandering isn't, I corrected myself, because lost is like there's no sense of home. And I've always had a sense of home, right? So I might have just wandered off. I might have not known exactly where I was at the time, but there was always that beacon, so to speak, right? There was always this understanding that I always knew where home was. I could always find that way back, right? Yeah.
But there was a part of you that was starting, especially in college, and I know that's true for me too, where my hero's journey began, right? Where the seeking began. And the seeking of knowledge is, like you said, wisdom, all these things, is really tucked into the human story.
Sure.
It's a little bit beyond the professor, the blackboards, the presentations, the talks, or even the communities that we find ourselves in and like walk out of, because you're just like, this is cool, but it's not fully me. And I met this one person here, and I'm gonna carry that person throughout my life, but the rest can go somewhere else. You know what I mean? Right? But that's what college is cool. That's why I feel like, I tell people all the time, like, especially young students, when I go speak at like high schools and stuff, I'm always trying to get them to go at least 6 months, one term into university or something, PCC, whatever it is, because start the process of seeking, start the process of your hero's journey, because you don't know where this path leads. And to be afraid of the path is to be afraid of yourself.
Yeah.
And I think you talk about that eloquently in our previous conversations, and how you found yourself in, with that note in paper, and you're also discovering the next layer of family, right? There's the home and you and your moms and all these beautiful things, and then the next layer. This is the hero's thing, right? Is this like something uncomfortable? And so tell me a little bit, because I know we've talked about this a lot.
Yeah.
Tell me about where you discovered your internalized voice that started coming out in the form of poetry. In throughout your seeking.
Yeah.
So let's dive into that a little bit.
For me, I got to take it back still again, right? And it goes back to family, teachers, and coaches,
Sure.
I was raised Catholic, right? And at some point when I went away to college, there was, what I referred to as a divorce, right? In transparency, right? So I was in church one day, right? I'd gone to college. I was a student athlete. I was no longer a student athlete. I had family around. I no longer had family around. And what I had was my faith, right? So I went to church on Sundays. And at the time it was the mission, right? So, if we know history, we know that the missionaries came over, right? And came over from Spain, right? And I'm sitting there in the annex of the church, and a vision comes to me, right? And I see the natives being in so many ways mistreated, right? And I go back to a story written by Jose Rizal, right? Which he was an incredible author. He's a national hero of the Philippines, and he wrote a story that described this kind of mistreatment in a way that led to the uprising against Spain, right? And at that point, I realized that this thing that I was leaning on, right? This thing that was I was identifying as, right? It wasn't serving me, right? It was serving a different purpose, right? And so I left mid-mass, and it kind of like started this journey, this seeking, as you refer to it as, just of that spiritual truth, right? And after that, man, I found myself in mosques, temples, sitting with Buddhist monks and nuns, participating in, different plant medicine ceremonies,
Sure.
right? Reading books, right? On anything I get my hands on, right? And really trying to find that inner truth, right? Because I think something that you alluded to is just this idea of self-reflection, right? And I think that, we're not taught these things, right? We're not taught how to reflect. We're not taught how to be present with ourselves while in the moment, right? While in the action of doing something, right? How to observe ourselves in these ways. And I think that it was a lot of that seeking, right? And not seeking like a teacher, not seeking like one truth, but seeking, the thing that resonated with me, right? And continuing to have those conversations with people, right? Ultimately, just it led to this self-discovery, right?
Yep.
And then it's an incredible thing, I think, when, again, I go back to my folks, right? That gave me every opportunity to, and I mean, not just the space and time, right? But also financially be able to give me the space to be able to discover myself, right?
Wow.
Because, I remember struggling in college, coming back one year, and, I had a teacher, um, Miss Rudy, right? And she was all my AP courses,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, I remember coming to her one time and being like, listen, I don't want to be in the AP class. I want to be in my class with my friends. I
Yeah.
want to be in these. And she's like, she was absolutely not, right? She
Yeah.
pushed me because she saw something else in me, right? And this
Mm.
is again, this goes back to, um, just people believing, community believing, supporting, when we have like showing us those blind spots when we can't see them for ourselves, right? Well, I came back one year and I was like, Miss Root, I'm really struggling right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? And she's like, Joemil, your problem is you never want to stand in line with everybody else,
Mm.
that, and for me, these are elements of, again, of learning about myself, right, through the eyes of someone else, right? So there's this idea out there, right, that was by, I think, a photography critic, right? The idea of mirrors and windows, right? That we can be mirrors for each other, we can be windows for each other, right?
Mm.
And so she provided this mirror for me, so that I
Wow.
could see myself in that, and realizing that, yeah, I haven't been able to do that. I've been able to stand in line and just go with the flow in that sense, right? And
I guess what I want to say is, when did that spark, right? Because you got this, because here you are in your hero's journey, and then you sort of, the helper found you, or you helped them, right? Or you found them,
mm-hmm,
and that happened for me quite a few times as well, right? That the the Yoda, if you will,
mm-hmm,
shows up,
mm-hmm,
and you're at a cross point where you're not you're trying to find your place, your footing in this vast universe.
yeah,
And I was there. That's why we relate so deep,
yeah,
because I feel like there were so many times where so many teachers, people, and it ultimately became my father, but I couldn't get to my father's wisdom. Like, it was so deep, you know what I mean? And I had to go through my own journey, and it was like the people who I was meeting, whether it be teachers, professors, or even friends, they were kind of like the stepping stones to be able to understand what my father was trying to convey.
yeah,
And so that in its own right was my own story. But like, I know for you, it's similar in its own right. But I was learning through tools, through seeking books, poetry, painting,
yeah,
whatever. I was just trying to discover deeply what else is in here,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
And then one layer at a time, peeling back, peeling back, peeling back. It was like, oh, this is more than the t-shirts and jeans. Oh, it's more than the,
yeah,
this architect guy who wants to be. It's deeper than that.
yeah,
And then I just kept like pulling them off, and I felt like, poetry has been a big part of my culture too for a
yeah,
long time. I never really got into it, but I've always loved and respected it, because when we were in that desert camp, my mother and father, my uncles too, dude, we would just lay down on these, I remember we would have dinners, and I mean, again, we're like nomads,
yeah,
really, in this refugee camp, right? And I remember my father would kind of just like hum and start doing some poetry, just kind of reflecting on the times and the stars above us, and I would just like doze off to like stories of that, and then growing up here, like, in a way, like, hip hop was really the only thing that I could like fuse that to,
mm-hmm,
because the way my mom and dad were portraying poetry, it was intertwined with struggle.
yeah,
It was intertwined with the misery in which we were living in. So I didn't get to experience like the beautiful parts of poetry that that were expositions of like life and light and wisdom.
yeah,
They were deep and dark. not that by no means it was their fault. It was because poetry is art. It's a reflection of time.
Yeah.
So we know when we got to talking about how you got into that art form and just like seeking your own way of, because not only does this mirror start to show you something, you don't see your face anymore, right? You start to see a way to express yourself.
Yeah.
And that's where it hit me. That's where it hit me. Like when I was painting or drawing or whatever, like my dad was always trying to encourage me, like, don't just draw and paint like what you see. Try to figure out what you don't see.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, what are you talking about? So go there with me. Like, how did poetry help you sort of navigate your inner world, your inner paths?
I think there were two moments, right? So there's Mrs. Nicholas in 5th grade, right,
Yes.
who formally taught us about poetry, right? That was my first, at least as far back as I can recall, that exposure to it, right? So I remember reading Robert Frost. It was one of her favorites, right?
Wow.
And The Road Not Taken, right? The idea that two roads diverge in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference, right? Yeah, I think back, in college I was one of the founding members of a student group out there, right? The Progressive Student Alliance, right? And we were kind of like an umbrella organization for, any social justice issue that someone was passionate about, we would help organize, right? I remember going to a peace conference in Berkeley as a result of my affiliation with that group, and seeing Amiri Baraka speak in front of a auditorium of like 500 plus college students, right, doing his poetry, and just remember being moved to tears.
Wow.
Right? Because I'd always known, I'd known about poetry because of Mrs. Nicholas, because of Robert Frost, because of, the Shakespeare and all those other things, right? But I didn't realize until that moment the power of words, right? That you could influence change, right? By getting to someone's heart, right? And that, for me, that's where a lot of the big moves in my life started, right? Was at that peace conference, seeing Amiri Baraka do his thing, and that planted a seed in me where I just started to write everything down, right? I started to write down those experiences of, the silence in a snowfall, right? The watching, the snow collect on a branch, and then, it turns into ice and encapsulates the branch or encapsulates the leaves around it. You know what I mean? I started to write all these things down and really strived, right? Tried to be a poet, right? I wrote down a couple pieces. I performed a couple pieces. But for me, I think that the change really came when I stopped trying and just was, right? Everything around us is poetic, right? Everything around us embodies a beauty, right? Is a piece of a moment in time, right?
Right.
I think I'm all over the place because I've been inspired by so many things.
Absolutely.
I think back to the the times I've spent with trees, right? Or rocks. Like, I spent a lot of time in Joshua Tree when I was living down in LA after college. I spent time in the Bristlecone National Forest, right? With these trees. There's a bristlecone out there that's was it old enough? It's so old that they use it to calibrate carbon-14 dating, right? I think about how many moons and how many seasons, that tree's gone through, and being able to be in the presence of that kind of wisdom, right? to have that conversation with it, right? I think about the rocks and all the weather that it's seen. I think about all the people that have walked up to it and touched it and all these things, right? And to have, again, the presence of mind to be there and to listen, right? To ask those questions, right? To learn more, and I'm strictly right now, I'm just thinking about them trees and them rocks, right?
I'm so inspired, bro. Yeah.
It's again, I'm here as a result of all the people, places, and things that I've had the opportunity to be with. You know, yeah. The poetry it's all around us, right?
100%.
And there are things that we can't express in words, right? And there's things that are best expressed in action, right? I think back to
Wow, beautifully said.
I think back to there's this quote that I keep on my emails, right? And it's by Henry David Thoreau, right?
I've seen it.
And it's to affect the quality of the day. That is the highest of arts, right? So,
God, wait, hold on, man.
yeah,
You need to say that again, because here's why. We'll get back to the story in a minute, but I have to take a break here.
Yeah.
Because, not only are you just an extremely powerful wordsmith, but like you convey your words very beautifully, in a sense of like you're not all over the place, by the way. You're extremely on a beautiful path, and you're taking us on a journey with you. And what I want to say, and pause here for a moment for our audience.
Yeah.
Specifically anyone who struggles with their day. Specifically anyone who wants to create an impact but has no idea how. A lot of people say, I want to do something with my life. I want to do something, that urge that to do something with your life, it has to be epic. And I was one of those people.
Yeah.
I think we all are, in our hero's journeys, we all seek to do something amazing and powerful. But what you just said, your quote, is one that I heavily learned about the importance of while seeking myself, right? My inner truth. So I want you to say it again, and I want you to we're going to take a break from the story for a moment.
Yeah.
But I want to go there for a second, because there are so many young people out there right now they're on their journey, they're on their path, and are struggling with that layer of resilience, that specific layer, and they don't know what to name it, they don't know what to call it, but it's a layer that they can't seem to uncover. But you uncovered it just now by saying, look, well, I'll let you kind of say the quote again.
Yeah.
But I want you to take me there for a moment, and the importance of the day.
Yeah.
Just the day you're in.
Yeah.
Not tomorrow, not yesterday,
Yeah.
but the day we're in.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
So the quote again is, to affect the quality of the day, that is the highest of arts, right? And so this comes about, again, I'm trying to be a poet in my life, right? I'm trying to do all these things. I'm trying to put the right words together, right? I'm trying to find the right cadence. I'm trying to deliver and entertain, right? I'm trying to make an impact, right? Make change happen, right? That's that point in my life where I was trying to make change happen. And I realized that, after seeing a Mary Baracco, right, that the best thing I could do is influence change. The best thing I can do is be poetry, right? The best thing I could do is make someone smile, right? The best thing I can do is be present for someone, right?
Wow.
It's when I think about that, right, as we bring this conversation to the youth and to the next generation and whatnot, I think what comes to mind to me is the disservice we've been doing, right, and that's as a society, as a community, right, you know, the lack of rites of passage, right, the lack of those ceremonies, right, the education that our children receive, right?
Oh, I love that, man. I love that you took us there.
Yeah.
I love, you know, I think for me, the type of people that I've been able to somehow, some way come across has always been phenomenal to me.
Mm-hmm.
And you help raise my awareness so much.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, man, you really do. And I think that's why I really wanted to have you on the show, because we'll get back into the topic of the youth and our families and our extended society, and how this passage, there's these moments of celebration in which we lack as a culture, and the importance of reinvigorating that, the importance of our arts, and being the art in which you are, like, putting out into the world, right? Like, it's not just about the poetry. Like, being a poet is living your poetry. Like, and it's very hard for some people to understand what it means to live, what it means to be the light, right? Like, what is that really mean?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And, well, because you've gone through a journey of self-discovery, and through self-discovery you come across these patterns, people, trees, right? I mean, you start to see yourself in everything, right? And it's like wisdom giving itself back to itself. And I love that, because you see that in people long before they see it in themselves. And so, like you said earlier, which is so powerful, it's either you got to hold up a mirror then, or a window. And I think for me, when I met you, it was, honestly, I think it was, for me, it was like you held a window into yourself, but inside that window was a mirror too. You know what I'm saying? Like, I got to see parts of myself within you, but you were also being vulnerable. And I think with men like us, it's really hard to be vulnerable around one another.
Absolutely.
Right? It's one of the hardest things. And it's, like, I love when I go deep with my closest friends. I typically don't talk about basketball, all the things that we like, the surface level stuff, because that's great. We all know what happened last night at the score. And everything, like, it was disappointing. Whatever, it was great. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But, I've always found myself in deep conversations with my closest friends, and they always revolve around self-discovery, around some sort of art in which they are practicing, whatever it may be, and I love that, because that's what we don't talk about enough. And that's how knowledge gets passed down or passed around. And I think, for me, man, I love this episode a lot already, because you're making me think about things that I haven't really had the opportunity and time to think about in a couple of months.
Thanks, man.
And I hope that our viewers really tune in, because we haven't even really gotten to the meat of the story. You know what I'm saying? So here we are, man. We're in college, and you're picking up the pieces, and you're learning about yourself, and you're kind of putting the components together, and you're learning, and you're seeking this poetry. You're becoming a poet, not to write and everything, but becoming the lived poet, right? And I appreciate that, because that's a layer of resilience that I think people neglect, in a sense of like, oh, I want to be this. Everybody wants to be something, right? But to be something is to truly live it. And when you stop saying I want to be, or I want to read, or I want to study, or I want to, it's like you say I am X, whatever I am is. That's the switch happens. The growth that moment of celebration. So take me there.
I always had an issue with labels and
Mhm.
and categories and boxes, you know. And so I did everything in my power to differentiate myself from that, you know. So when people started going, "Oh, hey, you know, you're a poet," or it didn't sit well with me,
Mm.
right? Like I went to school for photography, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think when I think about these things, you know, in this conversation, I think about photography, poetry. I think about them as expressions. Photographers, right, that inspired me, right? So it
Yeah.
was Sebastião Salgado, right? So he photographed in really stark black and white. I think there were those, like gold mines that were happening like present day, right? Like, you know, and his exposure of these things like ultimately led to social change, right? Like, you know, he exposed modern day slavery and was able to bring enough attention to it where change happened, right? So I remember seeing him speak at I think it was at UCLA or something, right? Um, and you know, the key takeaways for me is at some point he goes and says, don't go to school to study photography or um, to study art, right?
Mm.
Don't, he said, go to school and learn about life itself,
Mm.
right? And then find your expression of that,
Powerful.
right? So in his example, he was an economist, right? One of the things that he's done, you know, he's had many projects, right? But you know, he went around and photographed refugees. He photographed children working. He photographed in one of the most compelling pieces, right, was uh, the influence of industrialization on community,
Mm.
right? Um, it's that kind of learning, right? It's that kind of um, understanding, right? About this is about finding our voice,
Mm.
right? And learning to be courageous with that, right? Learning to express ourselves after we've spent time observing the world around us, right? Um, you know, there's so many key words that just come to mind as we have this conversation for me, you
Yeah.
know, like practice,
Yes.
right? The idea that, you know, you mentioned like, you know, as men, it's difficult to be vulnerable in these spaces,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, for me, that's an understanding that it's a practice to be a man.
Mm-hmm.
It's a practice to be a good friend.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that we go into thinking that there's some sort of mastery behind it, right?
Right.
Um,
It's infinite.
it's infinite and it's day to day. It's being conscious in every moment that this is what I'm doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, for me, it's a practice trying to be a good husband,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
a practice trying to be a brother to my sister, right? It's a practice being a friend. It's a practice being a man,
Mm.
right? And
Wow.
you know, we have an incredible opportunity again, going back to the sacrifices that our families have made for us, to redefine all these things for ourselves,
Mm.
right? We have a chance to, you know, really break some of those patterns that you know, that you alluded to earlier, right? Um, some of these things that we've been taught, right? And it's an incredible time to be right now, right?
Mm.
To be present in right now, right? Because, you know, the tech allows us to get this message out, right? The internet allows us to do more research, right? It also requires us to be more diligent, right? In
Mm.
terms of where are these sources, like who is speaking, right? Um, who's providing this information, right? What is their agenda,
Wow.
right? Um, what is their purpose, right? I think, you know, a lot of this, and you're right, man, we haven't even touched on, like, we haven't even got to the meat of this, right? But a lot of this ultimately, for me, comes to a sense of purpose.
Yes.
Right? So the spiritual seeking, the freedom that I was allowed to go on this journey, right? All of that is ultimately, for me, led to a sense of purpose.
Yes.
Right? And, you know, if I take it back to just, again, that spiritual practice, you know, when I moved here nearly, I think it's 11 years ago now, you know, I was invited to my first sweat lodge, right? And for me, it was that ceremony, right? It was that spiritual practice, that way of life. One of the greatest teachings I've received is Lakota saying, right? It's mitakuye oyasin. And that loosely translates to all my relations, right? And so that what that's taught me is that not only are you and I related, but we're related to the trees and the rocks and the grasses. And so as I move forward in this world, I realize that I'm never alone, right? I realize that I have a responsibility to all my relations, right? And that teaching led me to this purpose, this commitment that I've made in all aspects of my life, right? To be of service to our community, right? To live a life filled with meaning, right? To live a life that leaves it better than I found it, right? You know, that's that old backpacking, camping thing, right? Leave it better than you found it, right? Everything that I've shared to this point, right, has ultimately led me to this place, right? To led me to this place of self-discovery, to led me to this place of purpose, right? And then once you commit to that, right? Once you stop worrying about, you know, how there's that phrase out there, FOMO, right? Once you stop worrying about the things you're missing out on, right? Once you realize that you are on a path, that you have a purpose in this world, everything else opens up for you. And, you know, I talked about and mentioned just like the disservice we do for our youth, you know, like the things we teach them, right?
Yes.
And not to say there's not a place for those things, you know, but there are so many other things we can be teaching our children right now, you know, like how to think for yourself, right? How to break away from this group think that is leading us down a path that is really scary, you know? How to be creative thinkers.
Yes.
How to be artful in our approach.
Yes.
How to think outside the box, you know? How to take into consideration everything and everyone around us, right? You know, it's there's a lot of work that we need to continue to do to influence the systemic change that's needed so that we can all benefit and all live our lives, right?
100%.
And you know, again, I just have this sense of gratitude,
Yes.
right, for everything, period, right?
That is, I mean, bro, you hit on some remarkable things and so well said all across the board, and it's a perfect dovetail in about our work, intertwined with our purpose, intertwined with you know how we seek our work and how we approach our work in our community, because you know I definitely share that idea of how to, you know, once we realize how to improve ourselves, then we are on that journey. But parallel to that journey is it's not being selfish and realizing that, like, okay, what else do I do with this? Because part of self-improvement is community involvement, community service, really. Because that's, for me, it's like, you're only here to do one thing, spend time. How do you spend your time, right? And really, like, you have the 24 hours, and that's it. You have the 24 hours. You get to choose what you want to do with that. So our parents, our parents allowed for us to grow in this way, right? And we were in such an environment where the nutrients and everything was helping us grow in that way. But now that you're like a full grown thing, and still, you still got a little bit of growth to do here and there, and understanding here and there. But the main block has been carved. Now it's the nooks and crannies and the curvatures, and that's like the mastery, right? Now you're mastering yourself and really going in there and developing and pushing. But it'll never end. That work will never end.
No,
but at the same time, there's an opportunity to serve. Because really, like, I think wholeheartedly our purposes are always within. They're not necessarily outside, but we have to seek outside of ourselves to realize what's inside of us. So, like, when we talk about purpose and the importance of involvement with community and serving, right? It's, even a step up of, like, there's leadership, and then there is, like, service leadership, right? And I think you exemplify that so much from the moment we met.
Thanks,
at that market, where you showed up to the community. You showed up with the backing of, you work with this company, with the local organization, New Seasons. I'll let you speak on that more, but you showed up with them, and I'm not going to lie to you, man. For me, it was like, yes, there's a brother who works in an organization that can get us closer, can pull our work in, right? He's a magnet force. That's how I saw
Thanks,
you.
Man.
And that's before we even met.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there was introductions and things were happening. And I already saw you as a magnet force in of itself, because you had the hat on, you had the gear, looking fly with the jacket. I was like, my man not only stands out, but I could tell he's a magnet force. So you showed up with presence, and I believe that the things that you've been cultivating throughout your life show up in a way that's unique.
Thanks, bro.
Right? And that's what we want in our lives. Not to, like, just how we do our hair, or just how we... It's not just about your outfit, or what. Like, it really is about your presence. And from the moment you walked up to my booth, you're like, yo, what are you doing here? I remember, like, what is this? You know? And then we got to meeting and talking, and it wasn't even about necessarily, like, New Seasons and connections. It was more like, bro, what is your story? Where are you from? You look fly. You know what I mean? Like, and so we just got to talking about, we went from surface level to next layer within like 5 minutes, right? And your ability to do that with people, your ability to connect, has obviously come from this sense of gratitude, because your ability to say thank you is to work with someone and help them grow their vision, right? And I sensed that moment I met you.
Thanks, bro.
And so, what I want to talk about next is your purpose, definitely the community involvement part, and your work with New Seasons. And, we'll kind of tie it with, like, the current things that you guys are developing and working on how to help community projects, young entrepreneurs, solo entrepreneurs, get into the market space, or see what that's like, or like the sort of breaking down the intimidation of us walking through those doors. So talk us through that, man.
I'm blessed, right? I'm blessed. I'm in a position right now where my job and my work parallel, right? So here I am. I've made a commitment to be of service to my community, right? And I did that through ceremony, right? Realizing and understanding that this isn't like, there's no time frame on it, right? That the commitment really is for the rest of my life, right? And it's so strange, like, I oftentimes will reference like things being spirit led or divine timing, right? But I come from a labor background. I come from, um, most of my jobs prior to being here were under the table, right? And for me, it got to a point where I started to buy into this idea that all I am is a strong back for someone else, right? And I'll tell you that it was only after I made this commitment to be of service, right, where the doors started to open for me. And that same thing happened at New Seasons, right? So I was in the meat department, right, not too far down from here, right over at the Arbor Lodge store, and the opportunity to become a community coordinator presented itself. I have to think back to that first interview, um, and just be, again, that express my gratitude for being given an opportunity um, to help my community in a different way, right? Being able to be of service, not just as as someone laboring, right, using my physical body to do these tasks, but able to use my heart and mind to really put my full self into my work. Wow. So first, I mean, I always start with that, like just being blessed, and having this opportunity. In terms of the work and the job, right, and the parallels, I've had the opportunity to meet with incredible directors and volunteers for organizations that are really serving, and it's something that I just don't take very lightly, again, because of the sense of purpose that drives me, that motivates me, right? None of this feels like work. They tell you about it. It's like once you find something you love doing, right? It doesn't feel like work. And again, I think so much of it is spirit led, right? So when I joined the team, there was an understanding that we need to do things differently. We started to incorporate a racial equity lens, right? We started to look that the decisions we make need to be informed by the communities that we aim to serve, right? And so this is through the process of listening, right? Of listening to the needs, to the wants of the community. Some of the committees that I serve on, I mentioned Partner Fund, right? It's really about coming to an understanding that a company that has experienced a great deal of privilege, right? Using that power to open up opportunities for those who've, again, been historically marginalized and who have historically not had the same access, right? There's an understanding here that that the system itself, right, needs to be changed in a way that doesn't require a company to be the middleman in something, right? So there's this understanding here that there needs to be an infrastructure created, right? So that the communities that have that society has really failed to provide for, right? Or that has in so many ways let down, right? That we start to include them in the work, that we start to provide the access, that we start to use this position, right, in a way that can provide, an individual in our community, a family in our, like, the opportunity to build and develop their own generational wealth. The opportunities to learn things that maybe they just didn't think they were, to learn things that they just didn't know existed, right? To learn the ins and outs of an industry that hasn't always considered them.
Yes.
Right. The time is right now, and those of us who are in a position to help in so many ways are, I don't want to say obligated to, right?
It's a responsibility.
It is a responsibility. And it goes back to the thing that I, that teaching for me, right? All my relations, right? When you are blessed, have the opportunity to help, to assist, to support, it's something that just needs to be done, right? There's a value out there of just do the right thing, right? And coming to a place of understanding that this hasn't been done, right? This hasn't been done in a way that is inclusive, that is equitable, that is diverse, right? All these key words that are being used right now. It falls on those who have benefited, who have gained, right? To be able to give back, right? And pay that forward, and do these incredible things, so that we can live in the world that we want, that we all imagine, right? So that it is a reality for people who look like us, right? To thrive and flourish and really be happy, right? In the communities, in communities where we are, right? It's incredibly difficult work, in the sense that there's so much that has to change. It's often referred to as systemic change, right? And if we know and understand systems, there's so many different pieces at play, right? So for me, there's really an understanding that it necessitates, right? The systemic change necessitates collaboration. It necessitates us working together, sharing our resources, so that this all doesn't fall on an individual, right, or a company or an organization, right? Working together to influence that change, so that the next generation really doesn't have to do this same work over again, right? There's this, in the sense of purpose, there's a reminder that it's not for us, right? That it's for our kids, it's for my nieces, for my nephews, right? I want to be able to lay down the groundwork to be able to build the infrastructure, so that, it's, to some sense, right, easier for those who follow me, right? That the struggle, which will always be real, right? The struggle will always be real, but the struggle doesn't have to be as painful, right? It doesn't have to be, we're here because of the struggles and the work of those who've come before us, right? 100%. The social justice leaders who have, in so many ways, paved the way for us, right? who have trailblazed,
Yeah.
right? Who have sought a different way for us to do these things,
Yeah.
right? And so, there's this idea of legacy, right?
Yeah.
This idea of contributing to the work that's already been done,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and making that, again, meaningful, right? To be thoughtful, to be mindful, right? And this, that brings me back to just the idea that, being mindful is a practice, right? It requires us to be present in each moment, right? To be able to take the stories and experiences that have been shared with us, to simplify them and provide them to, and share those and give back, right, to those who haven't maybe been aware, who haven't heard that story, who haven't done it, who are in their own process of learning, right? So that there's this ability to translate and share language and ultimately communicate with each other, right? That's a long-winded answer, right? That's a long-winded answer.
No, man, because it's not really an answer. It's more, like I said, like this is a conversation that is necessary to have about our purposeful work. Because there's not a one sentence to the life in which you lead and this work that you just so happen to fall into, right?
Yeah.
And that you've had the honor of receiving this work throughout your hard work in your life.
Thanks.
And that shift from going from physical labor, right, to what you said about, using your mind and heart and your physical labor, right? Like using all of you to bring it to full service is something I truly admire in people, because that's a big shift, right? Especially us immigrants and refugees, because we think of work as that. It's if you're not doing, making, lifting, cutting, like if you're not physically moving, you're not working.
Yeah.
And we have to eliminate that idea, not eliminate it, but like have to put it in its respective place as as a thing that exists, and also see that we can pull our heart into the work, we can pull our mind into the work, and work with all of our entire self, and awareness that needs to happen there, right? And I love how you lead with gratitude. See, gratitude is the essence of our purpose, because it's how we say thank you to our parents, our grandparents, our great ancestors. For me, like writing my book was a way to say thank you to my heritage, right? To continue documenting the lives of men who travel and seek the world, even if it was forced upon them.
Yeah.
But to document it is a responsibility. And so to document this work right now, our conversation, for me now is a responsibility to open up a door, maybe two, to inspire, to help someone uncover a layer of resilience, at least one, maybe two, maybe four, right? And I think you've helped us uncover a lot today.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah, and we went deep, and I appreciate it so much, because the epitome of our conversations definitely revolve around our purposes and how they engage in our world and community. Real quickly, though, if you have a moment, can you tell us a little bit about what New Seasons, like, there's a few developmental sort of projects that you're working on. Can you specifically talk about those, or is that off the records, or what are we doing here?
Yeah,
Okay, because I know there's one in particular that really got my ears perked up that could really help our community, because this podcast is also an opportunity for people not to just listen in, but also like, oh, there's a thing out there for me that I can sign up to, or like a scholarship, or like, how does one get involved with New Season and your work? If you're a nonprofit out there, if you're a business or an entrepreneur, how does someone get involved in New Seasons and like bring their work to the table, or support their event, or whatever it may be?
Yeah.
How does one work with you? And then I'll end it with my final question.
So, a lot of the links are on the website, right?
Okay.
But one of the things that I talked about was the partner fund.
Sure.
I've mentioned the partner fund
Mhm.
a couple times now, and again, it's a microloan program that's designed to help historically marginalized groups get to market, right?
Beautiful. So there's an application.
There's an application on the website. In addition to that, there's a community link there,
Okay.
right? Also a donations link.
Okay.
And it's really about, sharing your story,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
sharing your organization's story and the work that they're doing,
Cool. I love it.
Yeah, and the beauty of our team is that we genuinely consider
Yeah.
everything that comes to us.
Yeah, and I know that from just knowing you
Yeah,
and how you like to lead.
appreciate it.
So I appreciate that, man. And so my final question, really, it's one that we use to title the show, the episodes, and it's one that's really near and dear for me because, this idea of resilience has so many different layers and for different people across the world. And I'm just eager and excited to unravel them in different people to see how they relate and help inspire others. So the question is, what is your state of mind?
I've known you a long time, and I've watched the episodes, so I've given this some thought, right? And I think, if I was to boil all this down, I think it's gratitude, right? It's gratitude for all my relations.
Beautiful.
Past, present, and future.
Beautiful. Well said. Well boiled down. And your grateful state of mind will never go unnoticed. I certainly have grown to appreciate it even more. And you've helped me recognize everything that I'm grateful for. And I am forever, man, just indebted to our relationship in the sense of, I hope to keep practicing being the friend, the brother to you that I hope that you are to me as well. And I hope to continue not only our conversations, but our work together and our communal sort of orientation towards service.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope to just simply be parallel to your world, man, for now and forever, always, for sure.
Well,
So I appreciate you coming on the show. You've enlightened me once again. I'm sure you've enlightened the audience today. Your poetic, sort of calm demeanor has definitely helped take this episode into a world we haven't been to yet. So thank you, man. I appreciate you coming
I
on.
appreciate you, bro. I appreciate this platform that you've created. It means something,
Thank you, man.
And again, I just have a tremendous amount of gratitude for the work that you're doing, right? For the work that you and your family are doing. For the purpose that you bring, And yeah, we're going to continue to work together. That's no doubt.
Definitely.
No doubt.
Thank you. Thank you so much, man. There you have it. Grateful state of mind, my man Joemil Santos. Please, you got to tune in for the whole thing. When I make these episodes, I'm trying to make them with love, as you can see, right? So you tuned in. I'm your boy Hussein Albiati. I'm your host. Thank you so much for tuning in. Wait till next time. Have a good day. Peace. Hey, wait. Just before you go, I have a little more to give. I want to give you a special discount code. But first, I hope you enjoyed our newest episode, recorded live in our Art of Resilience mobile studio. I want to give a huge shout out to our main sponsors, the Center for Retail Leadership at Portland State University. Look them up at pdx.edu. Also our friends at Portland Gear with portlandgear.com and Diaspora Coffee, an amazing company helping create jobs for refugees locally. I want to ask you though, are you struggling to build a good habit, overcome some self-doubt and fears, get focused on what you want to do, build a business, start writing that book and story, simply setting up some goals to achieve this year? Well, you need some habits. And in order to build habits, we need daily practice. You got to join the Resilience Club, which happens on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 7:30 a.m., where you are welcome to join for free and get into the best accountability club. Look, it's tough sometimes, and we don't have to feel alone in our journeys. We need some sort of push and someone to help guide us. Don't take my word for it. Look up the scientific facts behind accountability groups. You can join us easily as texting the word resilience to 503-461-1262. You can support us in two ways. One, by visiting refutees.com, poking around, and you may find a t-shirt or a poster that inspires you. You can use the code SPECIAL20 for 20% off. This helps keep our podcast going and gives back to the refugee community. Two, if you want to further sponsor our work and be involved with our Art of Resilience project, please get in touch through refutees.com. You can also share this episode and help us amplify our work to inspire and motivate. Thanks again for listening in. I hope to catch you next Wednesday for our newest episode. Trust me, you don't want to miss this.